For the last few weeks, we've been talking about the awakenings of great beings, and we're near the end. We're at number 7. This is what Dogen says. The 7th awakening is to cultivate wisdom. It is to listen, contemplate, practice, and have realization. The Buddha said, if you have wisdom, you are free from greed. You will always reflect on yourself and avoid mistakes. Thus, you will attain liberation in the Dharma I am speaking of. If you don't have wisdom, you will be neither a follower of the way nor a lay supporter of it, and there will be no name to describe you. Indeed, wisdom is a reliable vessel to bring you across the ocean of old age, sickness, and death. It is a bright lamp that brings light into the darkness of ignorance. It is an excellent medicine for all of you who are sick. It is a sharp axe to cut down the tree of delusion. Thus, you can deepen awakening through the wisdom of listening, contemplation, and practice. If you are illuminated by wisdom, even if you use your physical eyes, you will have clear insight. This is called to cultivate wisdom. I really like this one for a few reasons, but in large part because of the part that sounds so weird. Dogen says, if you don't have wisdom, you will be neither a follower of the way nor a lay supporter of it, and there will be no name to describe you. Now, on the surface, it just sounds like Dogen's being a jerk, and sometimes he kind of was. He liked to call people out. He liked to say, if you don't do this, you're nothing. If you don't understand this, you're stupid. So there is that. But he's also subverting something here that's really important and really central to how we understand this tradition. And of course, he's quoting Buddha, but it's him quoting Buddha. He's bringing his voice to this. He says, if you don't have wisdom, then you're not a follower of the way. But I think common sense would say that the reason we follow the way is in order to get some kind of wisdom. He's saying, no, that's not something you get. It's a prerequisite. It's where you start. And if you don't have that, you're not even doing this. This, of course, echoes the way that we talk about enlightenment. That enlightenment is a starting point, not an end point, not a goal. It's a prerequisite. It's a foundation. And then there's a lot of talk here that it was just kind of, it's saying wisdom is great. You know, if you're sick, it'll make you well. If you fall down, it'll pick you up, whatever that is. And that's okay. It's a little poetic. But inside it, we can get some sense of what wisdom is. One of the things that I really like about this text, and of course, we've been talking about these great beings as adults, is that it leans on something like wisdom instead of something like enlightenment. If I tell you that the 7th awakening of great beings is to cultivate enlightenment, where will your mind go? Even if you've read all of Dogen, even if you've heard all the statements about how we are already inherently Buddha, if I say that the 7th awakening is to cultivate enlightenment, your mind will almost certainly go to a place of fantasy. To a guessing game, to an imagining of what it must be like to be enlightened, to see through those eyes, to take in the world in that way. What does that feel like? What does it look like? What does it smell like? It's like if I said that the seventh awakening was to know what it's like to be a bird. It's a fun thought exercise. And you'll go there and you'll imagine what it must feel like to fly, what it must feel like to perch, what it must feel like to be so small or to sit so high in the trees. But you don't know. It's just a game. But in this text, where Dogen is going back to foundational teachings, he's going back to the Buddha, he's going back to the beginning, he drops that thing, that fantasy, and he says wisdom. Focus on wisdom. Why is that important? Because we know what wisdom is. Some part of our mind might do the same thing as it does with enlightenment. And I think, oh, wisdom is some big thing. And this tradition, and by that I mean all of Buddhism, sometimes is guilty of presenting a capital W wisdom, something that seems like it's out there. But this is the wisdom of an adult. What do we know about wisdom? Where have we seen it? We don't have to look to our spiritual teachers. We don't need to look to the ancients. We look to people who have experience in this life. We look to elders, we look to grandparents, we look to people who have been through something, who have seen something from the beginning to the end. And we notice how they look at the world, how they see, how they take it in. And it's not so mysterious anymore. I find myself in conversation recently, especially recently, a lot around a question of what it is to be big and what it is to be small. What it means to feel expansive and what we do in our lives to make ourselves contract. And I'm in these conversations because I'm talking with people who are suffering from anxiety, people who are suffering from depression, people who are deeply concerned about how things are going or about something that they don't know how to fix. And when we talk about that feeling, whatever it is that they're bringing, we end up talking about how it feels like a contraction. When those mindsets come in, things get smaller, things get narrower. The room gets a little bit tighter. And so we say, okay, well, that's something that's going on for you. But are there other times? Are there times when you feel like you expand? And almost inevitably, people can find it. Something, some activity that they do, some person they spend time with, a story they like to return to that makes things feel bigger and not smaller. When I think of the people I've known who have been wise, in many ways, they've simply been people who have had access to that expansive place. They see a bigger picture. They understand that this little thing, while it may be painful, while it may be real, it will pass. There's more. There's a phenomenon sometimes where, for example, a kid, a teenager will want to have some crazy hairdo, or they want to pierce their ear, and the parents will be deeply concerned, right? And they'll contract around it. Say, oh my gosh, if you do that, you'll ruin your life. You won't have friends, you won't be able to get a job. They see it as so small. And then the grandparents will be the ones who come in and say, oh, it's fine. That's fine. Do what you need to do. They've gone through that process of contracting. But the contracting takes so much work. It takes so much effort, so much energy, that over time, either through years or through experience or through pain, they start to default to having an open hand. We see this and we know what it is, even if we're not experiencing it ourselves. It's not unimaginable. It just makes sense. And then in this text, we add to it, not just this knowledge that wisdom is something that's already there. But Dogen gives a little clue. He talks about it twice. He says that it's to listen, contemplate, and practice. This set, listen, contemplate, and practice, extends across numerous traditions in Buddhism. Right? The Tibetans talk about it. It's found in Indian Buddhism. It's a set. You take something in, a teaching, theoretically, but it doesn't have to be just a teaching. You take something in, and then you digest it. It says contemplate, but contemplate takes a lot of different forms. It might be thinking about it. It might be reasoning it through. It might also be just letting it sit. And then you act. If it's a teaching, you put that teaching into practice. If it's a problem, you act based on that processing, on that metabolization. Listen, contemplate, meditate. So here too, we're getting a description of wisdom. This isn't what you do to have wisdom. This is what wisdom looks like. It's a slowing down. And importantly, it's a humility. It's the willingness to really take something in. The willingness to let it rest in the body without defining it, without making it smaller, without rejecting it. To just let it kind of roll around. See where it lands. See what it becomes. And then it's understanding that there's a responsibility, having done that, to do something with it. It can't be just abstract. Nothing really is. Listen, contemplate, meditate. Memorize this set, and then notice how hard it is. At the end of this, Dogen says, if you are illuminated by wisdom, even if you use your physical eyes, you will have clear insight. And here acknowledging that we don't imagine that the eye of wisdom is just this eye. We imagine that it's some other kind of seeing. No, it's you. It's this eyeball looking at this world. It isn't out there. It isn't special. It isn't in the clouds. This is a wisdom you know. It's a wisdom you have access to, and a wisdom that you can choose. If you relax a little bit, if you slow down a little bit, if you listen a little bit. It's the seventh awakening, so it sounds like it's a really big deal. But it's not. It's not a big deal at all. Now stop there.